What's up, Young Kings? Time for your morning motivation. Just got done running 4 miles. Kind of a slow 4 miles this morning, about 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes per mile. Got out on the street today, running these streets. And I realized the streets, as I mentioned before in some of the previous videos, it forces you to go the distance. So sometimes when you're on the track, you can choose to stop and say, well, I'm only going to do a mile, 2 miles. But when you run in the streets, if you run out 2 miles, you got a minimum of 4 miles that you have to do in order to get back to your starting point. So it kind of forces your hand a little. And I think that's a little tip in life as well. Sometimes we got to get off the track and get on the streets, outside of our comfort zone, the ability to stop prematurely. And I think that what kills a lot of people's dreams is that they stop prematurely. They stop too soon. And if you're out and you force yourself to where you have to go the distance, you'll find yourself progressing a lot further than if you were just to be stagnant and just going around in circles. Plus the scenery is different. You know, it's a different vibe. When you run around the track, everything looks repetitive and it can be boring. But when you're running on the streets, you see different scenery, different things, and it's kind of it's a distraction, like you're seeing something new, something different. So went 4 miles today. I'm not sure how far I'm going to build myself up because this morning my body was aching, and I had to get out here in spite of how I felt, and then all the pounding on my knees and on my hip. So I know I'm gonna have to probably soak in the tub tonight in order to, to resolve some of this soreness. But that's another tip in itself. Don't just do things when you feel like it. Sometimes you got to go even if you don't feel like it. And that's the elements of progressing as well. If you wait for good days, then you realize you'll be waiting a long time, and you only have those good days few and far in between, because there's always a reason that you can justify for not doing something. But the key is to do it in spite of not feeling well. So I woke up sore. I thought about just going to the gym and just lifting weights, but I knew that I needed to get a run in. So I stayed true to that, and I'm proud that I did stick with it. So got the 4 miles complete. But as I was running this morning, started to realize, this journey I've been on, and it's been an intense one. I know I've been off the net for a few weeks, but life is still happening and things are still growing and progressing day by day. And this battle of the rebirth and the thing that's got going on, developing my authentic version of myself, I realized like there's periods of your time where you're gonna feel as though things are falling apart, and you're gonna feel as though people are walking out of your life. And that is one of the normal feelings to have. As I was running and as I was reflecting over the last few weeks, I realized like a lot of times the people that say they love you the most will probably support you the least. And that's no indictment on them. It's just the way the process works. So don't be discouraged when you find yourself having to encourage yourself, because there won't be people there to encourage you, especially if you have attained a certain level of success in itself. Meaning like people expect you to be strong. They don't expect you to need help or to be weak. And so if in their mind, they don't need to give you words of encouragement. They don't need to support you. You are the strong one. And you are. But where do the strong go when they need help? And that's why it's important to be rooted and grounded in who you are and in who God created you to be, and not in what other people's opinion of you may be. So get rooted in who you are, and that's developing that authentic version of yourself. And a lot of times you're going to have to encourage yourself in the Lord. And that's what David said back in Psalms. He said he had to encourage himself because the people that were around him were not supportive. They weren't encouraging him. He had got to a place that people can speak to the depth of his need. All they can see was the external version of him. They didn't know the inner workings of some of the struggles that was going on in his heart and in his head and in his soul, some of the torment that he was going through. And their ignorance of that, they're out there living their lives, but in their defense, they got those same struggles. They got a lot of things that they got to deal with on their own. So don't expect people to be there for you. And if they are there, thank them, celebrate them. But 9 times out of 10, they won't be there. And if they are there, they'll be there for a short duration. I think it's essential that you get to this point in life where it's only you. And you got to invest in yourself. You got to invest into your mental mind state. You got to invest in your health. You got to invest in your spirit. You got to have something to pour out of. And when you invest in yourself, this is not a license to be selfish and just go out and do everything on your own. I keep saying that as a precursor to these messages, because what you cannot do, you cannot pour from an empty vessel. Meaning that if you're not full, then you have no ability to give to others. It's out of your abundance that you're able to give. And a lot of people give. I'm a giver, so I even give out of my lack. It doesn't take me to have much for me to give much, so I'll try to give. And even in that, you got to be careful, because when people recognize that you're a giver, there's more takers in the world than there are givers. So you got to be careful that making sure that you, especially me, I have to make sure that I feed myself, because there's people around that are not there for the long haul. And you'll realize to your circle, there's people around you that just around to see what they can get from you. They're not there to benefit or help you get to a point and destination. They're just there for them. And this is how you know the real ones. Say no to someone and watch how they respond. Do they respond like they're entitled, or do they understand, or do they start to pout? Do they separate themselves? If you have to say yes to someone all the time in order for you to maintain a functioning relationship, that's not a relationship. That's one-sided. That's just them benefiting from you and not pouring into you. So just be mindful of that. I'm mindful of the late great DMX that just passed away, who invested so much of his life into the entertainment business, but he had some struggles that were deep, dealing with drugs and multiple other things that he dealt with, broken relationships and things he had to overcome. And although the exterior, people will see him in his manifestations of the way he prayed and the way he entertained, and towards the latter part of his career, you can see some of the internal conflict manifesting on the outside, because if you don't start dealing with those things internally, they will become visible on the outside, and people will celebrate your gifts, but then they'll talk about your weaknesses and things of that nature, and they'll come out in the end after the death and celebrate and how much he meant to them and this and that. But the reality of it is, it's like there's going to be more people crying at your funeral than clapping at your graduation. Meaning that when you start to excel, the further you go, the smaller your audience get. Now, your first graduation from high school, yes, the family is there, but if you start to progress beyond high school, beyond college, and this and that, the further you go, the smaller the audience will get. And if it is a large audience that's still there, the people that are sincerely proud for you will be few in between. So just be mindful of that. Don't just give of yourself all the time. Sometimes you got to pour back into yourself, and that's what this morning was about for me. To even though I didn't feel like running, for me to pour back in, to invest into my future health by getting up, and in spite of being sore, running today. So there's some people that's connected to you that are leeches, And in order for a leech to be fed, it needs a host. A leech, it gets a hold of your skin, and it just sucks the blood, and it, although it's hurting you, it's feeding itself, and it'll get fat, and it'll get, just continue to grow. And the thing about a leech too, once they get on there, it locks on tight. I mean, there's been stories where people have to get knives and actually cut it off. And that may be some things you have to do in relationships, is start cutting people off. And this is not an anti-relationship thing or anti-friendship things. This is a pro-you thing, developing the authentic version of yourself. Some people get so accustomed to using you that they really don't know who you are. They just know what you do for them. I always, when I get calls from people that I haven't heard from in a long time, I always listen to the third sentence. The third sentence of the conversation will tell me what was the real meaning of the conversation, or the point where they called me. Meaning, the first one is the introduction. Hey man, what's up? Ain't heard from you in a while. This and that, so that's the first introduction. The second one is like, it's just a more casual conversation. It's like, hey, how you been doing? How's the life? How's work, and how's this going on? So that's the second stage. You got the intro, and then you got the calming, the reacquaintance phase of trying to get you to understand, like, hey, y'all friends or whatever. And then the third one is, hey, I was thinking, I ran into some hard times, and I need. That third sentence will tell you what was the initial meaning of the call. So you got to be careful. Don't get rocked to sleep by, hey, I haven't heard from them. And even if you have the ability to do it, don't let people use you to that extent where you're just getting, they're just benefiting from you but not investing into you. So make sure that people invest in you and not just take from you. So as we going through this thing, and I did about a 12-minute rant, and I'm not going to be here long. I got to go do another COVID test. Got a doctor's appointment on Wednesday, so they want me to do a COVID test before I come in. But anyways, as we go through this, developing the authentic version of yourself, one of the 4 steps I think we're on is like, identify discrepancies. Like, is there a difference between who you are in the way that you speak and you conduct yourself? Like, have you ever said something and you wonder, like, did I really mean that, or am I just saying that to get along? And you got to be able to be honest with yourself in all things. Just meaning, like, people come in my office and sometimes I have to catch myself from using filler words, just to carry on the conversation, to avoid that awkward silence where people come in and they just stand there at times, and it's like, okay, you don't want to be rude, and then you just throw out some filler stuff, and it's like just casual conversation. So even now in my casual conversation, I'm monitoring to make sure that I'm authentically communicating what I want to communicate, and being intentional in my speech. And this is not a walk of perfection. I don't get it right. There's times afterwards I do a reflection on that. It's like, you know what? I could have handled this a little differently. So you got to be able to assess, like, are you just saying something to get along? And because your adaptive self wants to fit in. Your adaptive self wants to just have a cozy environment, and there's nothing wrong with comfort until comfort, starts to impede on your progress and start, not allowing you to get to the point where you want to go. So sometimes you got to leave your comfort zone, but your adaptive self wants to remain there from a permanent state. And that's not a permanent fixture or place you should be. This walk to becoming authentic, it's an uncomfortable one. As I mentioned, there will be times where you walk alone. There'll be times where people try to walk with you, but they're not really in alignment with you. And if you're not careful, that's a delicate thing to navigate, because you're just coming out of a place where, you may have been alone, and then someone comes alongside of you and you want to embrace that company. But at the same time, you got to assess, are they moving me closer or further away from my goal? So all company is not good company, and you got to realize that. And sometimes you have to pull yourself back. And there may be times you embrace that for what it is, not having an expectation that it's going to be something that it's not. I was just talking to one of my friends, and I told him, expectation pays the path to disappointment. Meaning, like, as soon as you expect something, or even expect yourself out of someone else, you're going to be disappointed. No one's going to treat you like you. No one's going to do for you like you do for others. And I think that sets us up for a disappointment, because we look at people and we reflect like, man, I would have responded to me differently had they came to me with this. But you can't find you in other people. There's only one of you. So when you start expecting things from other people, you're going to realize that it's going to pave the way for your disappointment. And that expectation is the beginning of diminishing your friendship and relationship. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have standards or boundaries, but what I'm saying is, when you place those expectations on anybody external to yourself, you just given that person permission to disappoint you. Now, whether they choose to disappoint you or not will be on their character and on how they conduct themselves as individuals. But you just gave them the power of potential to do that. And they can turn that disappointment and that potential into talent and really let you down. So the key to it is expect nothing from no one. And when they do something for you, you appreciate it because you wasn't expecting it. Like, if someone were to come up and just give you $100, you were able to embrace and celebrate that because you weren't expecting it. And it's a blessing when they do something for you. But let's say you had a need and you went and asked someone for $100 and they said, nah, I don't have it. Now you a little disappointed because you still got a need. So get to a point where you're sufficient in yourself. I'm not saying that you won't ever have a need and you won't never need help, but try to depend on yourself. And when I say depend on yourself, it's the God in you. And you were created in God's image. So if God has given you, He's giving you talent, He's giving you talents, He's giving you ability, He's giving you favor. So if God's giving you a task, it's not up to you to get there. It's up for you to take that step. And it talks about having faith. If God wants you to get through something, He's going to get you through it. And faith is like coming to the edge of a plank and there's nothing but darkness, and stepping off the edge and realizing one or two things is going to happen off the cliff. It's like either God is going to catch you or He's going to teach you to fly. But if God, and I used to have a saying like, if God give me to it, He's going to get me through it. And I keep telling myself that if God gets me to it, He's going to get me through it. Like, it's not dependent on how smart I am. It's not dependent on how strong I am. It's dependent on my God. So when you put expectations on other people, you allow them to disappoint you. But when you put that expectation on yourself and the God in you, you realize you're stronger than what you really realize. And you'll empower friendships to be a blessing to you. So when people do something for me now, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. I don't expect it. Very rarely will I ask for help, and that's not a compliment, and that's an indictment on me. It's just like, man, I'm gonna figure things out, and I'm encouraging you to do the same. Is pull back your strength, and when I say pull back your strength, I mean pull back your expectations of others. Pull it back. Release people from that, and allow them to be who they are, and then deal with them accordingly to who they are. Now, once their actions indicate they're A, B, and C, it's time for D. And the D is make a decision on if you're going to continue to mess with them in that capacity or not. So, let people show you who they are and then deal with them accordingly. And because what I realized in this isolation and in me finding out the authentic version of myself, I'm still me. And the difference is those who walked away just don't benefit from me. It's not an indictment on me, because when my time expires, it's just going to be me in that casket. There's not going to be a room for two. It's just me. So the reality of it is I'm a blessing. I feel like I'm a blessing to myself and others. And if people choose not to benefit from that blessing, that doesn't stop me from being a blessing. It just stops their benefits from receiving that blessing. So, and the same with you. Your life is a gift. You know, there's so much talent and things that you have to do that if you were to take ownership of that and really be who you are and not what people say you are, you realize, like, you are more talented than you give yourself credit for. You are stronger than you imagine. You got this. So, life lesson, you know, start being authentic who you are, because if you don't, you lose you. And the thing about losing yourself is that it's not like they love you more. It's not like they appreciate you more. They get to the extreme, you know, and you can find yourself depleted and you can find yourself used. So don't get to a point where you're used. There's a difference between being used and being utilized. Seeing used have you depleted. Used have you feeling left over. But when you're being utilized, it's like you're being empowered to use your gift for the good of others. So be well, young kings. Have a great day. Stay encouraged, even if that means encouraging yourself.